Alright guys, welcome to the video. This time we will have a discussion about what coin is better in different situations. A lot of people tend to think that red coin is just always better, but I think that's very, very wrong. And with me today I have King Chess.
Hi guys, great to be back.
So basically, coin in Gwent decides who's going first in a round. And the person who's on blue coin has to go first and gets the advantage of having a stratagem they can choose. That could be tactical advantage, boost the unit by 5, it could be magic lamp, gain 5 extra points, and there are a few other different options as well. Whereas if you go on red, you have the advantage of being reactive, and basically you can never really lose an even. So, back like previously in Gwent, then red coin used to always be better, basically, because back then there were no such thing like stratagems. That was back in the beta, I believe. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. So back then, like, red coin was pretty much just objectively better. But now it's a lot different, I think. So maybe we could like discuss some of the situations where blue coin might be better, or where red coin might be better. So first example is the engine decks. If you have like an engine deck, what do you usually prefer to play?
So an engine deck generally would like to go on blue coin first, right? Because an engine deck, you can use that stratagem, your TA or a crystal skull to protect that engine. So you get one engine that'll probably stick, which will help give you a presence in round one, and therefore just like snowball around and take control of the game. One thing that I think has empowered blue coin a lot more is the change away from the dry pass, right? Like the fact that you have to now play 3 cards. That was probably one of the most impactful things that's changed it from red coin being 100% the better coin. Because now on red coin you can always threaten to win on even, right? Whereas in beta Gwent, on red coin you could just like your opponent would have to drive past turn 1, right, and they wouldn't be able to contest the round because they might lose because they don't have the TA or whatever. But yeah, now blue coin essentially with an engine deck means you get control of the round, which can often be very important in Gwent, right? Round control is super, super important.
For sure. And one thing we are discussing is the stratagems, but nothing is similar, just the turn order. Like, for instance, if you take like a classic shield wall mirror, the person who went first in a long round almost always won, because they could just develop their own engine first, and then the opponent either had to answer that and play their own engine. And then again, the player went first, it's their turn again. They can now decide to answer their engine or play another engine themselves. So like they all just always stay like one engine ahead, and over the course of an entire round, that just makes a huge difference. So, general rule of thumb: if you're playing an engine deck, you want to go first. Now, you could also be playing something like a control deck. And for control decks, it's a little bit different, because usually you kind of struggle to put points on the board. You kind of don't really have that many engines you want to develop anything. You usually prefer just to sit back and control the opponent's side of the board.
Yeah.
So usually for red coin, I would say that for control decks, I would say that it's definitely better to go second, right? Now, obviously, then what happens if you have a control deck and an engine deck that go up against each other? Like one prefers blue, one prefers red. Are they both happy? It kind of depends. It's a little bit difficult to make a general rule, in my opinion. I'm sure. What do you think about that, Jess?
So generally, if that happens, the control deck's happy, right? Because control counters engines. So generally speaking, that's what the control deck wants to queue in. Now there are exceptions, and obviously engine decks generally like to be on blue, but they also generally don't like to queue into control decks. So
yeah, true. And maybe the engine decks can sometimes try to win an even if they are on red coin instead in that
exactly,
matchup,
yeah,
right?
yeah, they can flip the script a little. So that is one example where an engine deck may want red coin. So generally they'll want blue coin, but against a control deck, especially for example, let's say hitting cash versus Skellige, you might very well want to be on red coin to threaten to win on even with like a soul or something, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a huge threat. So also general like in matchups where you're a little bit unfavored, where you feel like your only win condition is winning an even, then obviously you want red coin, because it's not really possible to win an even on blue coin.
Unless you're Kelly.
True. So if you're running Siri Dash, obviously then you can kind of flip the coin flip. But but that's kind of a special situation.
Mhm.
And then also I would also probably say that like if you're going like if round one is super important, there's some matchups where getting last say is just all that matters. Then it might actually be better to have blue coin again because you can just have 5 points of a head start. So one example could be a precision strike control mirror. Because maybe like can you explain what happens if you don't manage to win 1-1?
So a precision strike control mirror. Generally, what will happen is if you don't win round one, your opponent won't play any cards in round three. All your or any they'll play cards, but they won't play any cards or any points on the board. They won't put any units on the board. Maybe justice, but other than that, probably not. And honestly, like they'll probably won't want to play justice if they have no other units, because essentially what they'll do is they'll completely brick your leader, right? And that's a lot of points in a precision mirror. And yeah, essentially they will discard the damage things so that you have to discard your damage things, and it'll end up being whoever has last say is in the better spot because you can put a points on the board without any reply from your opponent, right? So whoever has last say gets the ability to play some points on the board that can't be answered.
Yeah, for sure. So in these sort of situations, like sometimes I feel like it's better to be in red coin in the mirror, but honestly, like quite often it's just better because people, I think like a common mistake to make is that you kind of say, okay, it's fine, I can do some even, I'm just playing passively. If my opponent starts committing good cards, maybe I'll just stop. But it's very important to know your macro strategy and know that this match we just need to win round one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you guys are probably getting a little bit bored of us just talking now. So we would like to show some gameplay. So we have went into some friendlies and tried to show some of these examples we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So the first example we have here is Lockdown versus Witches. And so basically what you can see here is me playing as NR Witches and Chess playing as Lockdown. And one of the main advantages to going first as NR Witches is that you can actually use your stratagem on your Griffin Witches here, which is Crystal Skull. And basically that means that first of all, it goes out of removal range. Second of all, it protects against locks. And as you know, Lockdown usually plays a ton of locks. So by doing this, then Lockdown can't actually answer anything. What happens is that this engine kind of just wins the round, and you can kind of just like play more bad cards while just constantly gaining passive points. If it's the other way around, you start with a Griffin Witcher, the opponent just locks it, they joust it, they do something like that, and then you kind of just struggle.
The other advantage to this particular deck on Blue Coin is that the Griffin Witcher actually has an adrenaline ability where it will lock its damage something by 3 and lock itself. Well, if you use the Crystal Skull, it will not lock itself and it will just become a 4-point per turn engine with the adrenaline 3.
Yes, absolutely. So this deck in particular probably like almost always just prefers Blue Coin simply because of that interaction. Because these Griffin Witches, like they are a little bit mediocre if you don't have Crystal Skull. Like just play them 1 point a turn, and then sure they have a little bit of a finisher, but it's random. Sometimes it's not even particularly good. So I think what we'll see here is that I will just forward a little bit here. But if I can do that. So basically what we'll see here is that the Griffin Witches here kind of just smurfs quite hard. And at this point, it's not really possible for Nilfgaard to do very much. Like they would have to start committing very good cards to keep up with this. We're gaining 4 points passively. Well, 3 points passively and then 2 points actively each turn. While the Nilfgaard player is gaining 1 point a turn. And at this point, we can kind of just drop whatever. And very quickly, what happens here is that we force a pass from the Nilfgaard player. And in this matchup in particular, getting to a long round 3, or well, at least getting round control is very, very powerful. Because what happens is that if you're in our witches and you can bleed out the ball, Nilfgaard loses a lot of their value. At the same time, if you go into a long round 3 and they get to develop their ball, it's a way closer game. It can go either way.
Yeah.
So the next matchup we have here is Lockdown versus Kelly. And what's special about this matchup?
this matchup, so for blue coin for Kelly, they have the dash, right? So they can sort of reverse the coin flip, so to speak, which is easier to do on blue coin for Kelly to get the dash through, because of the TA, the Crystal Skull, yet again,
Yeah,
being a particular pain for lockdown.
for sure. So let's try to move forward to that matchup. So here we have it. And what's happening here is that Kelly goes on blue coin, and that means that it kind of just allows them to use the crystal skull to protect against locks again. So it's kind of the same interaction we're showing here. Just another example of it where you can drop your dash, you can give it crystal skull, and then it's very difficult for the opponent to really do anything to it. In this situation, we start with defender. Now, usually, if the opponent drew their cards, they would probably go for cupbearer here to purify it. So like the purpose of this play is that you want to purify the opponent purifies your defender, which is only purify, which means that afterwards you can then go Series dash with a crystal skull, and then they can't really do anything. Now in this case, chess is not drawing particularly well. So what happens here is that we don't actually need the crystal skull in particular, but it still is a really nice advantage because it means that like dash means that we draw a card, so all of a sudden we are actually in red coin rather than blue coin, and we have a 4-point advantage rather than having a 5-point disadvantage to the opponent's stratagem.
Mm-hmm. And this is what makes Kelly pretty scary, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like that's one of the reasons why Kelly is probably one of the strongest decks, because regardless of the coin, you can just always take advantage of this, of the situation. Like you can, like this deck probably wins an even, like I don't know, like maybe 56% of the games, maybe even more than that. It's very, very tough for the opponent to do anything. Granted, there are some decks that can counter it, but a lot of the time, the opponent just can't do anything. As you can see, we draw another card. We are all of a sudden it's 6 versus 6, and we are up by a bunch of points here. These Master of Disguise, they aren't really doing much of a job here. Like they're pretty slow. And like usually, if you win an even with Kelly, you have Erg in the graveyard. It's pretty much just a game over. Yep. So this game is kind of just done here. So let's try to go back to the next matchup we have. That's Skytel Control versus Lippy. And how does this matchup go, Chess?
So this one will depend on coin a little bit. Whoever's on red will be much happier. Having said that, Lippy is probably favored regardless. Shiru will make a difference. So if you're in SD control with Shiru and you get red coin, it becomes a lot closer to 50-50. But if Lippy gets red coin, it doesn't really matter what ST control's running. They are extremely unfavored. It's about as bad as it gets for ST control queuing into Lippy on blue coin. Which is one of the reasons you don't actually see ST control that popular on ladder, is because a lot of the time they can struggle on blue coin a lot more than some of the more ladder friendly decks that are okay on both coins. Because ST control is very much a red coin abuse deck. Lippy is also kind of similar. It is a very much a red coin abuse deck. However, it can still operate its game plan on blue. It just doesn't have the ability to win on even, which is often its win con, right? Whereas ST control can't really get away with its game plan on blue, right? It wants to play slow. It wants to build up this carryover. It can't do that on blue. Therefore, you can't. It doesn't see as much play on ladder because of that. Yeah, and yet you see it everywhere in tournaments. It's like the #1 pick in tournaments.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like it's a classic example of a deck that's like really, really good in tournaments. Like as you mentioned, like almost everyone is playing it. And on ladder, it can be good sometimes, but also like a lot of games, you have to play it on blue, and then we can show you the game, and you can kind of see what we're talking about if you're unfamiliar with how this plays out. So going to this game here. Here, I believe it is. So we have Precision Strike on blue versus versus Lippy, right? And we have to go first here, from the Skytall perspective. And as you can see, this hand, it would be pretty okay on red, right? We have like an agitator, we have Skax, we have some Circle of Life. We kind of just build up carrier pretty slowly. Um, in this case, we are on blue coin, so we try to develop a Pyro first because that plays a little bit more value. Kind of just try to see if there's a chance that we can somehow get out of this round. But anyone who like knows the matchup will know that as soon as the opponent just jams their Lippy, then they play. Sorry. They play for so many points, but in this case it's like what, 18 points. And maybe you have Justice here, you can try to compete a little bit, but like quite often what happens is that it's not even gonna be close. In this situation, I think I just try to develop a little bit of carrier instead, and say, okay, I know that I can't contest around to just play for carrier, but basically these things would have happened as well if it had been on the other coin, except in that case we would actually still be up a card, right, going to round 2.
Yes. Just a quick one for anybody wondering. I assume you played the Rebuke there over the making a bomb. I guess it was on the wrong row, right? So it wouldn't have killed it anyway.
Yeah, so making a bomb
Okay.
wouldn't have killed the...
But it's also carryover, right? Playing the Rebuke for the...
Yeah, for sure. So we will just let this game run out here. We get a little bit unlucky here with the Circle of Life hitting the Tiger, unfortunately. But yeah, like as you can see, like after the series is committed, just barely needs to play anything here, right? You just take the round. It's not even close. So,
and from this position, there's nothing that SD Control can do. They just get bled dry, go into a short round 3 where then they play their Ceres again and with last say. And even if you had a Shira, there's nothing you can do, right? If you have a Shiro in that scenario, maybe you can commit the Shiro and Justice, and maybe you can get out of round 1. But it depends on the Lippy's hand, because even Shiro and Justice won't be enough if they have, say, Totem and the location. You're still probably going to lose uneven and lose 2 of your best cards. So
it's a really scary situation, and I think like probably if you're on red coin, you're running Shiro, you can kind of just try to stall a little bit. You can like at some point when the opponent goes Ceres, you can try to use the when they go Ceres, you can try to use the Shiro as a catch up mechanic, or try to like save it for round 3. But if you're not running it, like you lose uneven, you're gonna get bled, and then you can't really do anything. So very coin dependent matchup. That's kind of what we want to try to show here. Like instead of just being like, oh, I got blue coin, I have to go first this game, I can't run uneven. Then try to think, okay, does blue coin actually help me achieve my macro strategy? Like, does it actually mean that it's easier for me to get to a long run 3 if that's what I want, or something else? Also, like one strategy that's actually like not used very much at all, actually, is the blue coin tempo abuse strategy. Just maybe you can explain how that works.
Yeah, so there's not many decks that do this anymore. I'm not sure if it's by design by CDPR. They've kind of moved away from decks that would try and do this. The most obvious example of Homecoming where this was a thing was Slizzard. Essentially, what they would do is they would get blue coin, and what they would do is they would just jam their witches with the roach come out. They would jam maybe one big unit, maybe riders, something like that, and then pass at 7. And essentially what that would mean is they would put down so many points on blue coin within 3 turns that there is no way you can play 4 cards and equal their score. So you have to play 5 cards or 6 cards to equal their score, which you would think, it doesn't matter. It's round 1. I'm not losing card advantage. I can just dry past round 2. But the reason that was a strategy was if you dry past round 2 against Lizard, you're going to lose. You can't win the long range against Lizard if you have damage cards. So you end up being forced into taking a long round against them or bleeding a deck multiple cards down in round 2. And bleeding down more than 1 card is almost a death sentence, right? They have 2 cards to catch up to, then they can keep all their power. They don't have to give you anything to interact with. It's just so hard to bleed when you're down 2 cards going into round 2. This tempo strategy normally is done by either super engine heavy decks that want long round 3 or some sort of combo deck that is super strong in a long round 3. Normally, like the more what quote unquote degenerate decks would look to do this, but there are examples of very powerful engine decks. I think the old Northern Realms charge deck could do something sort of similar if it had the tempo ability in round 1 at times.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like the decks that you see do the most right now is something like Hidden Cache. They really have the leader ability to help complement the strategy, and it's like obviously really engine heavy deck. So like they really utilize from getting around control. Another example could be something like Shield Wall trying to commit their first assault to force an early win and hence force a long round 3 basically. And even if it doesn't work, then it forces the opponent to start committing some big resources. So instead of always being so focused on do I overcommit this round, and try to think about like what happens if we actually just go into the long round 3.
Yep.
So I think that's basically it for the video. Do you have anything else to add, Chess?
No, I think the only thing is we did touch on it at the start, but maybe we could talk about it a little bit more. Is it's blue coin and red coin is whether you go first or second in round 1, and you use that to leverage whether you go first or second in round 3, right? Because a lot of the time we did talk about it is engine mirrors. You want to be going first in that round, right? So if you win round 1, you go for the 2-0, right? And then, for example, the reason ST Control quite often wants to be on Redcoin is that they can play the catch-up game in round 1, manage to get their last say, which is what they're looking for, so that they can play their big finisher or control your big finisher or whatever. So another thing you have to keep in mind when you go into round 1 is, do I want to have first say or last say going into round 3? Because if you want first say, you're better off losing round 1 in a comfortable manner, or winning round 1 and then going for the 2-0, right?
Yeah,
So that's, you have to bear in mind whether you want first say or last say in round 3, and then play your round 1 with that goal in mind.
exactly. So, all right, guys. Thanks so much for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked it, and see ya.
Bye, guys.